Everything work for audio for folks?
Yeah.
All right. First, I want to thank everybody for attending today's press conference. We certainly have a mutual interest in making sure the public stays informed. I want to start by saying that GLWA is committed to water of unquestionable quality for all of the communities that we serve. We start by using water from the Great Lakes, which of course is a wonderful source, and we treat that to standards that surpass the regulatory requirements. You know, the main break of this magnitude impacting so many customers is really unprecedented in our system. In an emergency situation like this, we will always err on the side of caution in advising our public about how to assure their water is safe to use. And that's where we'll start. We're very sorry for the impact that this is having on families and businesses in the communities that we serve. And well, for many, it is at least an inconvenience. For others, it's much more than that, affecting their schedules, taking time off work, with kids out of school, maybe rescheduling doctor's appointments, maybe rescheduling procedures that have been scheduled for some time, maybe moving out of their home or having to be relocated from another facility. We know that this is a big impact, and we're very sorry for that. Lastly, I want to assure you that we have been working around the clock to get service restored as quickly as we can in all of our communities, and we have been coordinating with your local communities as well with Oakland County, who opened their emergency operations center early last evening, and we sent staff to work with them in the emergency ops center as they coordinated with all of the Oakland County communities that have been impacted. And we will continue to work diligently to restore service to everyone so that they have the quality service that they expect from GLWA. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Cheryl Porter. She's our Chief Operating Officer for Water Operations and Field Services, and she'll provide you with the current status on our service restoration efforts.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to give everybody an update as to where we are. We have been able to isolate the 48-inch transmission main where the break has occurred, which has enabled us to begin to repressurize certain parts of our system. And we are currently on site. We have the pipe on its way from Illinois, and we are excavating and securing the site, preparing to remove that aspect of the pipe that has been damaged. And as soon as the new pipe arrives, we will be putting that into the system and then proceeding with our testing measures. There are two aspects of the testing. One, we want to make sure that the new pipe can withstand the pressures within the system, and the next will be the water quality testing, which typically takes about 48 hours, which is the standard protocol for a system recovering from a low pressure boil water advisory. Our current focus is on customers out of water. We're looking at what we can do in our system in order to effectuate and get water to those customers who do not have water. Sometimes that is by providing assistance to the local communities, by assisting them in opening their interconnects if there are those that exist, and whatever way we can facilitate to help to ensure that we are getting water to everyone in our system. We are diligently working on doing that. We will continue to provide updates as things develop and keep the public informed. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
What do you know about what was going on before the break happened? Is there construction in the areas or anything that, I know you're saying in here that you're not concentrating yet on what caused it, but a lot of people want to know.
Yes, there will be an investigation. We were not expecting a water main break in this area. This particular pipe was installed in 1970. It's been about the mid-service life of this particular pipe, so it was not something that we expected, but we do have measures in place. For instance, we incorporate condition assessments and inspections on our pipes, and we are currently in the process of trying to get additional contractual assistance to help us in that effort. That will help us to identify any areas in our water transmission system where we may be vulnerable, then that way we can effectuate a repair before an actual water main break occurs.
So what I'm hearing you say is this is not considered old, and you wouldn't normally inspect that?
The inspection would be on any age pipe because you don't know what you can run into in your system. So we would want to have a program that's regularly scheduled to do inspections throughout the entire system, and that's what we are preparing to do.
So one of the things that's unusual here is in the GLWA system, our pipes are very large. It's not like the local systems where oftentimes you will do acoustic listening and other things of that nature. The technologies for inspecting pipes of this size, and particularly of some of our berry length, are fairly sophisticated and relatively new. We can't take our pipes out of service to inspect them, which means you have to use technology that can inspect them while they are in service. And so that's still relatively unique in our service sector. But we certainly have identified a couple technologies that we're using, considering deploying. But you have to be able to actually get it into the main in active service as well. And many of these mains weren't designed for that kind of access. So it's a bit of a challenge for a system of our size with the size of pipes that we have.
Am I understanding then that these pipes have not been maintained or inspected since their installation?
Maintaining a pipe of this nature is really a misnomer. There is no maintenance of pipes per se. Pipes are put into service. Typically in a system you'll exercise valves, but the pipe in a water system, other than acoustic listening for leaks, is generally not inspected. Again, inside inspection is fairly new in our service sector and very unusual for pipes of this size.
So when you say that the main focus right now is on the customers who don't have water at all, could you explain that a little bit more? Like how are you trying to help them?
So with a regional authority, with a system this size, typically you have redundancy in certain areas. Now in this particular area, we're looking at the far western portion of our system, and it does not have that redundancy flexibility that may be on the internal side. Now they do have some flexibility that can exist through emergency connections, through water storage, also through interconnections between local communities that can exist, and we would effectuate those efforts with existing resources to try to make sure that whatever connections we can make to restore service to do that. So in this particular case, we recognize that once we were able to isolate the system, then we were able to start to repressurize certain aspects of the system. So it's our way of rerouting flow within the capabilities of our current existing system.
How long would you expect to take before at least some services restored to people who don't have any water?
Well, I can actually say as of now, we have been able to restore some water pressure within the impacted communities. So much so that some of them are going to begin to engage with their own water quality testing and may be able to get off the boil water advisory sooner. And so we have been working with them in those efforts and are fully ready and available for whatever we can do. So a lot of this is troubleshooting. We don't know what's going to work until we try it and see what's going to happen. Currently for those customers who are without water, it is because there's something that's impacting us in effectuating a reestablishment of the system or a rerouting of the system to restore water services.
Are you able to be a little more specific? Can you name communities that might be the lucky ones given this scenario?
I have been in conversations with West Bloomfield as well as Bloomfield Township. Those are the two that I recall in this moment.
And do you have staff people who can take a look at your diagram, your grid, and say, okay, the water flows here, so we can redirect water here, or, you're talking about these workarounds, or you're saying our way of rerouting flow. Are you mapping that out right now? Is that your plan of attack?
Actually, we have a system control operations center which is responsible for that direction of flow. So with GLWA, we are greatly advantaged in that we have 5 different water treatment facilities, and that gives us flexibility in the system. So if we were experiencing an issue such as this, that's where they would look at the overall system and try to redirect things based on our pumping stations or whatever assets we have available to us. And sometimes that's in coordination with our customer communities and working with them, and to reestablish and make sure that we have service to all of our customers during an emergency.
So given that, are you able to say we have a couple of redundancy systems, 3 or 4 areas where there is redundancy and we can restore service through that?
So
by
most,
looking at the grid?
most of the systems, most of the individual communities are back in service through one means or another. In the far west part of the system, Wixom, for instance, has a backup well system. They put their wells in service and they open an interconnect to a neighboring community so that they're serving well water. It's not the quality of water that they would normally have, but they have water to use. In most of the other communities, there is water available for use now. We have 2 particular areas that are still having issues with water not being available. One is the northern part of Novi, and the other is the northern part of Farmington Hills. And we're evaluating both of those circumstances now to see if there's an issue with valves that may not be fully operational, and whether or not we have pressure boundary conditions on the opposite side of those interconnects with other communities that will be sufficient to serve them. So we actually have people in the field working in those couple of situations. But for the most part, service is available, certainly still under a boil water, but water is available to most of the other communities.
Okay, so I'm just repeating back what you're saying. Water is, there is some water restored to everything but Novi and North Farm.
To portions of those communities.
Do you have like a number of households?
Cheryl, you do.
Actually, we did have a number. So, according to Oakland County, there are 259,706 residents that were impacted in this current situation. There are 51,380 currently without water as of our last report.
So, I'm sorry, the ones who have it restored, we've still got this boil water advisory.
That's right.
We don't want to mislead people, right?
Absolutely.
The boil water
Absolutely.
advisory, until we officially say it is lifted, it will be in effect until we can properly test. So until the testing is official, we will not be relieving that boil water advisory, even if people are seeing higher pressures.
And
The
so-
boil water advisory is still in effect.
And so is it still then, excuse me, because I've walked in a couple minutes late, is it still that, time frame of Wednesday to kind of get this replaced, then the more testing, and then still looking at Friday with the possibility that places like Bloomfield, who you've been in contact with, may get it a little sooner, is that correct?
That's
Still the
that is
time
correct.
frame? Still looking at Friday though for most folks?
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
I'm a little confused on the numbers too. 259,706 residents, 51,380 are still without water. So take away the 51 from the 259, you still have a little over 200,000 who have what? Reduced water pressure then? Is that?
They have water available to them. Some may have reduced pressure, some may have full pressure, but it's water that is still under a boil water advisory.
Is that residents affected or residences?
Residents, population.
So that kind of includes businesses as well?
It's the population.
Can you talk about how and when you guys became aware of this problem and that decided to issue the advisory?
The size of this main, we will see a pressure drop in our system. So at 5:45 yesterday evening is when we recognized that there was a drop in our system. And at that point, we would dispatch crews, which is exactly what we did, to the specific location to find out what's going on. At that point, they were able to see water running in the streets. And so they began to isolate the traffic around the area, as well as to begin to identify the valve locations for isolation.
Can you speak at all generally about the age of the system and infrastructure upkeep? There are critics of the system who are saying that these 100-year events are happening more and more frequently between the east side flooding, the lodge in 2005, and now this. Your budget for capital improvements, believe is lower than you anticipated when you went to Detroit. Can you talk at all about the pressures that you're facing to trying to upkeep this system at a time of flat population and your customers?
Well, there's a couple things that we've embarked on as an agency that I think are important here. And the first of that is really rigorous master planning and condition assessment. On the wastewater side of our operation is what you're talking about with regards to the flooding. We've done a very rigorous inspection of all of our combined sewer overflow facilities to make sure that they are operating at design capacity. And we've done a great deal of investment in those evaluations and in some corrective measures, of course, over the course of the last 18 months. We've also embarked on a program of condition assessment in those large conveyance systems. And that's a little bit easier to do because you don't have to worry about whether or not you are tainting the product, so to speak, like you would in water, trying to look at an active system. So you do have to have relatively low flow conditions, but you can get in with cameras and physical inspection. And I'm happy to say that we believe by the end of this calendar year, we will have been inside of every one of those large conveyance system pipes, and we will have a complete picture of condition assessment. I can tell you that to date, while we have found a few issues that we felt was necessary to respond to pretty quickly, the majority of what we saw can be programmed in our capital improvement program on the sanitary sewer side. On water, we're out looking to do exactly that same sort of thing, a methodical condition assessment on all of our water transmission mains. We've done a very good job of master planning, so we have a good idea of where we can avoid capital in the system, and we will know when we have condition assessment done where we need to make capital investment in the system.
I know you said it's big, but is it big enough then to handle all the residents?
Big.
The water main? Is this system, could it be a
Well, this system was built for a much larger service population than what we serve today. An example of that is we have over 1,700 million gallons of capacity in 5 water treatment plants. And within the most recent 10 years, if we look at our peak demand in the summertime, it's been about 800 million gallons a day. So we have twice as much capacity in production facilities, and we have more than enough capacity in our transmission mains to move water around.
What you're saying, what happened yesterday, it sounds like it's just like a whodunit, like capital improvement may not have caught it.
I'm sorry?
Well, it sounds as though what happened yesterday, you're saying sort of a mystery.
Well, we have not completed an investigation, right? So it could be a variety of things. It could be a defect in a piece of pipe. It could be that there was a pressure surge. We know that there was a bit of an electrical interruption in one of our facilities. We don't know whether or not that would have resulted in a pressure surge through the system that might have taken advantage of maybe a weaker piece of pipe than might exist elsewhere. So until we complete an investigation, we can't tell you the reason. What we can tell you is it's the first break on this particular piece of pipe. There were no prior warning signs. And unfortunately, this is an unprecedented event because it's affected in an area of the system where the redundancy is primarily provided by connections between communities and not by 2 transmission mains that can reinforce the entire area.
Excuse me, your press release here says that the water transmission pipe is installed in 20-foot sections, and you would remove the sections that are damaged and replace with a new pipe. Do you know how many sections are damaged, or how much you're looking at there? This 20-foot, another 20-foot. I mean, do you know yet, or?
We're still in the midst of the excavation, and again, a 48-inch transmission break is a lot of water, so we've got to remove the water in order to expose the pipe, and we are currently in the process of doing that. So we do not know. We are anticipating maybe 2 sections. We have on the way 3, and so we are preparing to put that new pipe in place as soon as it arrives.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the pumps in that area are relatively new compared to other pumps in the system. Are there not fail-safes to prevent a surge in pressure when there's a power fluctuation? And my second question is, were there vacuum release valves on the pipe near where this occurred that theoretically are supposed to mitigate against a pressure surge?
So with the pressure relief valves, I would have to get back to you on that answer. with the details on the system. Again, our primary focus has been let's recover and get our customers back on water. So that has been our primary focus. Okay, but we can get you an answer on that. As far
Are
as
your pumps designed to deal with pressure variability that might be caused by a power fluctuation?
our system is designed for us to, if a pump trips out, for us to reestablish the service in that pump. There's no guarantees for every aspect of our system that we don't create a water hammer in doing that, but we do have some precautions in certain areas of the system. And again, with the water master planning effort, we have identified some critical areas where we will focus on, and it's about the condition assessments on valves and pipes, and aligning our capital improvement program and focusing on the areas where we need maintenance or reinvestment, and doing that strategically as critical issues are identified.
I'm sorry, you mentioned that there was an electrical problem at one of the facilities that may or may not be involved in this, but can you just give a little bit more detail about that? Like what happened?
The only thing I know is that there was a power interruption. That facility did not have power. Once the power was reestablished, then the pumps were turned on. So we think that may be a source for the cause, but again, without a proper investigation, we don't want to say that definitively.
Sure, which facility was that?
Can I get the answer to that question later?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't recall the name of that particular
So
one.
the interruption would cause a surge and start again.
That's generally not the case. That doesn't typically happen, but we think that might be a possibility just due to the proximity of time in these two situations. So we're looking at that as an area of focus for our investigation to flush that out.
How deep underground under the street is this main? How many feet down below the surface?
I think typically our, and I'll have to confirm the actual footage, but typically it's 6 to 10 feet depth.
So just to be clear, you're expecting by Friday, just to have proper pressure restored, or you're expecting to actually lift the boil water advisory by Friday, or?
Our expectation is by Friday to lift the boil water advisory.
By
To
end
give
of
it
day.
all clear.
By Friday or by the end of?
By end of day Friday.
So will that be everyone at once, or is it gonna be in stages for the people who came back first? 'Cause some people still don't have any at all.
The stages are occurring because of the customer communities who have reestablished flows. So they are evaluating their systems individually and making those calls about sampling, starting their sampling early, and proceeding with toward relieving themselves of the board water advisory, which that is the normal protocol. It's not normal for a regional authority to issue the boil water advisory. We thought it was prudent on us to do so because there were so many communities impacted by a GLWA asset. So that's why we facilitated this boil water advisory, but typically it comes from the community itself. So we are not preventing communities from relieving themselves once they have reestablished pressure. And if they decide to proceed with their sampling and put their systems back, then they are free to do so.
So some people could be as soon as,
It depends on when they start their sampling. And like I said, I've been in conversations with 2 customer communities, so that could be as early as Wednesday or Thursday. But it really depends on when they collect those samples.
Any even general sense of how much this might cost yet?
Not yet.
How long do you expect the investigation into the cause to take?
We will try to facilitate as quickly as possible. Right now, we are looking to engage a contractor who we hope can use this modern technology, that even though we're putting the pipe back in service, that they'll still be able to give us some analysis on this pipe. And we are currently in conversations to get that going now.
Just a numbers clarification, I know you mentioned the 259,000, this press release says 304, which one, there was an
There's an update to what you currently have, and we do have hard copies available.
Gotcha, okay.
So what number? Correct.
It's the one that's in this.
Okay. And are you advising schools, close or stay open? And selfishly, do you tell them to open tomorrow?
So the majority of communication with member communities about what to do with regards to school closures and other facilities had been managed through the Oakland County Emergency Operations Center. So we are not advising schools individually by GLWA, but rather the Emergency Operations Center in Oakland County is working with their public health department and others to make those determinations or advisories to the schools.
This is probably more a question for the EOC too, but I'm hearing anecdotes of bottled water becoming scarce up in the affected communities, and obviously they've got to make it to Friday. Is there anything doing?
We can't speak to that.
facilitating?
Can't speak to that.
What about in terms of assisting hospitals?
We have not been in direct conversation with the hospitals. They've been in conversation through the EOC with Oakland County and Public Health. I know some communities have been looking, those who have storage have been looking at refilling their storage with tankers and other things in order to particularly serve hospitals, but we would not have the particulars on any hospital.
Is there anyone that looks over GLWA's shoulder on your assessment of what went wrong here, in case, they're like a regulator or anyone like that?
We'll certainly file our evaluation report, an incident report with MDEQ.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Is the 259 accurate or the 304? What's in this? Is that?
The 259.
No, the 304.
The 304 is accurate.
Oh.
Those are last minute updates.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is a dumb question. You said this is unprecedented. Does that mean then that unprecedented for GLWA or unprecedented for the whole history? I mean, are you saying that these 48-inch pipes just simply do not, never collapse like this?
In the recent history of staff memories, whether it's the regional system operation under DWSD or the regional system operation under GLWA, a break of this nature in an area that lacks regional system redundancy is unprecedented. This is the largest number of customers, largest area of communities impacted by a single incident. Also unprecedented in that this particular pipe has been in service for 47 years. It's never had a break before. So whether we talk about this specific area or we talk about the magnitude of the area impacted, unprecedented.
But 48-inch pipes do break.
Types
Actually,
of all sizes break.
yes. Actually, I can give an example. In November of 2016, we had an 84-inch pipe break. And in that particular situation, it was in Troy. No customer communities were without water. We were able, there was sufficient redundancy in that aspect of the system where you did not even know unless you drove by that area that a water main break had occurred. Just as an example.
You know what the soil consistency is under this? 'Cause I've been told sometimes you might get a small leak. That small leak will cause the soil underneath to erode, pressure builds, and that can cause a catastrophic break.
That's true, particularly if you have that kind of a condition near any type of, where there's an outlet for the soil. If it's close to,
Aquifer or something.
well, more commonly, if there's a sanitary system nearby that doesn't have integrity, the soil will disappear into the sanitary sewer and nobody sees anything, right? You don't see it unless you begin to see the soils in some great amount showing up at a sewer plant
But
somewhere.
my question is, as your people have looked at the grid and they pinpointed on that grid and that map where this is, do they know what they're dealing with?
Again, the investigation is ongoing. Given the amount of water here and the soil that has moved with the water, I don't know whether we will be able to make a determination whether or not there was any undermining. But when we see the pipe, we'll know whether or not it's a joint separation, which is typically what you would have if it's undermined or if it's a lateral split or some other nature. Once we are able to see the pipe, it'll be easier to conclude an investigation.
Once you clear all the water down there, you're gonna have a camera take some pictures, kinda like what they did in Fraser.
Yes.
We're just wondering if we're gonna get some photos or video or
Right.
something of it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's really interesting because people don't,
Yeah,
it's
that-
not generally something people have access to.
We'll be
so
doing good
that's-
documentation. We'll be happy to share it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I ask one more question? Just in terms of the communications, ongoing communications with people, do you have particular strategies you're using for that? I mean, are people getting a text messages or, alerts about, when the water's safe or, just an update on the situation?
Our current system that we have with our customer communities, we maintain an emergency contact. So we have been in constant communication with our customer communities that have been, their representatives that have been impacted since yesterday. So we maintain that list. Typically, we do emails. We can do follow-up phone calls in this particular case because there was a boil water advisory. We follow that up with specific phone calls to their water quality experts to begin to facilitate that communication.
But the locals are actually responsible for passing on the message to
Yes, we'll do some things through our social media channels in terms of the status and et cetera, but we generally are not communicating directly with individual customers unless they're calling us.